Are you on the hunt for a sharp, versatile, and affordable portrait lens? Maybe an 85mm f1.8 lens has caught your eye. But which one should you choose? Nikon? Sony? Viltrox? Or even the TTArtisan 75mm f2? In this video, I'll compare these lenses side by side. We'll look at their strengths, weaknesses, and most importantly, which one might be the perfect fit for your photography style. Stick around to see how they perform in real-world scenarios like portraits, sharpness tests, and even tricky lighting situations with flare. Let's dive in. I tested these lenses on a 46-megapixel Nikon Z7 II, but the sample images were shot with a Nikon ZF and Sony A7 Mark III. Special thanks to Viltrox and TTArtisan for providing their lenses for testing, and a shout out to Karahul Photography and Wolfgang for lending the Sony and Nikon lenses. Without their help, this comparison wouldn't be possible. All the Sony sample images are also taken by Karahul Photography. You can see more of his work on Instagram by clicking the link in the description below. You can see this review as a written blog post on our blog site, where you will find detailed test charts on sharpness and other characteristics, and most of the sample images in high resolution on a separate site. I leave links to the blog post and the sample image site in the description below. First, let's take a quick look at the specifications. I'll highlight the most notable differences. If you'd like to dive deeper, feel free to pause the video to study the details or visit our blog post where you can review everything at your own pace. The lenses featured in this comparison are the Nikon Z 85mm f1.8s, Sony FE 85mm f1.8, Viltrox AF 85mm f1.8 Mark II, and TTArtisan AF 75mm f2. While most lenses here have a focal length of 85mm, the TTArtisan stands out with a 75mm focal length. Similarly, three lenses have a maximum aperture of 1.8, but the TTArtisan is slightly slower at f2. Another unique feature of the TTArtisan is its aperture ring, which none of the others include. When it comes to autofocus motors, all the lenses use a stepper motor, except for the Sony, which uses a linear motor. In terms of size and weight, the TTArtisan is the most compact and lightweight, while the Viltrox is the bulkiest and heaviest. The Nikon stands out as the longest lens of the group. In terms of optics, the Sony has the simplest design with 9 elements, followed by the Viltrox and TTArtisan, which each have 10 elements. The Nikon, on the other hand, has the most complex construction with 12 elements. All the lenses include one ED, extra low dispersion element, except for the Nikon, which stands out by incorporating 2 ED elements. Let's look at the handling and build quality. The Nikon lens feels really solid and well built, with a tight premium assembly. The barrel is made from durable plastic that doesn't feel cheap at all. It has an AM switch for toggling between autofocus and manual focus, plus a large focusing ring that you can customize to control other functions. The Sony lens is also well built, but it doesn't feel quite as robust as the Nikon. It's got more of a plasticky vibe. It does come with an extra control button, a smaller focusing ring, and an MF-AF switch to toggle between manual and autofocus. The Viltrox is the biggest lens in this lineup, both in size and weight. Its metal body gives it a solid premium feel, but it doesn't have much in the way of extra controls, just a large focusing ring. The TTArtisan is the smallest and lightest lens of the group, but it feels surprisingly dense thanks to its all-metal construction. One cool feature is the aperture ring, which lets you manually adjust the aperture in 1/3 of stop increments. It also has an A position for automatic aperture control from the camera. That said, the clicks on the ring are really soft, maybe a bit too soft. So it's easy to accidentally bump it out of place with just a light touch. All the lenses in this comparison come with a metal mount plate and electronic contacts. The Viltrox lens stands out with a USB-C port on the mounting plate, allowing for easy firmware updates. The TTArtisan lens takes a different approach, placing its USB-C port on the rear lens cap, which doubles as a firmware update dock. For the Nikon and Sony lenses, firmware updates are handled directly through the camera, no extra ports required. Now let's talk about what's included in the box. Each lens comes with front and rear caps, as well as a lens hood. The Nikon lens has the most robust and generously sized hood, while the TTArtisan's hood is pretty basic and feels a bit flimsy by comparison. One thing to note is that none of these lenses include image stabilization. All 4 lenses feature autofocus, and most of them use stepper motors, except for the Sony, which uses a linear motor. In our autofocus test, where we shot 26 to 28 images alternating between 1 meter and infinity, all the lenses performed well, with one small exception. The Sony lens missed focus twice, which translates to about 7% of the time. The autofocus speed was pretty similar across the lenses, but the Nikon did snap into focus just a little faster. I have to admit I was a little bit let down by the Sony. Its linear motor didn't really give it any noticeable edge in AF speed compared to the others. Optical features. Let's start with sharpness. I will not go into the details for each lens's sharpness, as this is just a comparison. The Nikon Z85mm f1.8 is one of the sharpest 85mm f1.8 lenses out there, and that holds true here as well. The Sony is noticeably less sharp, and the Viltrox is the softest of the bunch. What's really surprising, though, is that the TTArtisan comes pretty close to the Nikon in terms of sharpness, sometimes even sharper in the center and midframe. When it comes to the corners, though, the Nikon pulls ahead by a significant margin, leaving the TTArtisan behind. The Sony lands in third place, with the Viltrox coming last. This general pattern holds true across all apertures. Sharpness at portrait distance. Let's focus on the key areas of the portraits. The center, the inner periphery, around the 1/3 rule intersection, and the outer periphery, around the 1/4 intersection. At wide open, the Nikon Z comes out on top, clearly winning in sharpness. The Viltrox and TTArtisan follow closely behind, with the Sony trailing in last place. When you stop down, the Sony gets sharper, especially outside the center, moving ahead of the TTArtisan. However, the Nikon remains the sharpest at every tested aperture, with the Viltrox coming in second. Sharpness at close-up distance. When it comes to sharpness at close-up distance, all of these lenses are sharp, even wide open. The Nikon is the sharpest overall, but at close distance the Sony holds its own and actually outperforms the others. The TTArtisan, however, is the least sharp of the bunch. Just a quick note. All of these lenses are pretty sharp, sharper than you would typically need for super sharp images. But for this comparison, we are focusing on how they stack up against each other. Lens distortion. The Nikon lens has virtually no distortion, if any at all. The Sony is also really well corrected, showing almost no distortion. The Viltrox, on the other hand, has a bit of pincushion distortion, while the TTArtisan has just a tiny amount. So in terms of ranking, the Nikon and Sony tie for first, the TTArtisan takes second, and the Viltrox comes in third. Vignetting. When it comes to vignetting, the Nikon, Viltrox, Sony are pretty much on the same level, with the Nikon being just a tiny bit better. However, the difference isn't something you would practically notice in real-world use. The TTArtisan, on the other hand, is noticeably behind the others. Aberrations. When it comes to longitudinal chromatic aberration, the Nikon and TTArtisan perform the best, with the least amount of it. The Sony, unfortunately, has the most noticeable and pronounced longitudinal chromatic aberration. Now, while the Sony, Viltrox and TTArtisan each have just one ED extra low dispersion glass element, the Nikon uses two, and it really shows. Thanks to the extra element, the Nikon is really free from longitudinal chromatic aberration and comes out on top in this category. The TTArtisan is a close second. The Sony, however, lags behind with the worst performance here. For the lateral chromatic aberration, at 200% magnification, the Nikon and TTArtisan show almost no lateral chromatic aberration, while the Sony and Viltrox exhibit noticeable purple fringing in the corners. Flare resistance. Let's take a look at a few different scenarios and compare how each lens performs side by side. In the first case, wide open aperture with sun in the corner and somewhere else. This is a pretty common situation you might encounter with any of these lenses. When shot wide open, the Nikon is the best performer, with the Sony close behind. In the second case, we look at the sun near the rule of third intersection. In this case, the Nikon clearly outperforms the rest, showing a notable advantage over the other lenses. With the sun at the long edge of the frame, none of these lenses handled this situation perfectly. However, the Nikon still came out on top, while the Sony struggled the most. Sun in the corner of the frame. The Nikon handled this test almost flawlessly. Honestly, it's hard to find any real issues here. The other lenses, though, had significant struggles with noticeable flaws. The gap between them and the Nikon was pretty big. And at last, sun in the middle of the frame. This one is a less common scenario, but still worth noting. None of the lenses really excelled here, though the Nikon did perform better than the others. To wrap it up, the Nikon demonstrated the best flare resistance of all the lenses tested, earning its spot as the winner in this category. Comma. All four lenses show some comma when shot wide open. The Nikon performs the best here, showing the least comma, while the TTArtisan exhibits the most noticeable comma. As you stop down the aperture, the Nikon's comma reduces quickly, followed by the Sony and Viltrox. The TTArtisan, however, takes the longest to improve. So in this category, the Nikon takes the lead. Sun stars. Portrait lenses with an odd number of curved aperture blades aren't usually known for creating great sun stars. That said, all four lenses can produce decent sun stars at f16, though none are standouts in this category. Among them, the Nikon lens does the best job, delivering more distinct sun stars even at wider apertures. The rest, pretty similar to each other. Focus breathing. All four lenses show some focus breathing, but there are differences in how much. The TTArtisan has the least, followed by the Nikon, but honestly the differences are pretty minimal. In everyday use, you're unlikely to notice much of a difference. Bokeh. Bokeh is one of the key factors when choosing a portrait lens, right up there with sharpness. Most modern lenses deliver fantastic sharpness, and while some might edge out others, sharpness is usually not a major concern. So let's focus on bokeh. Since bokeh is pretty subjective, I've shown it in a variety of scenarios so you can see it for yourself. I'll share my favorites at the end. Let's start by taking a look at the bouquet. Checking out the bouquet balls, none of them have onion rings, so that's great. Now, what really sets the Viltrox apart is that it gives you the largest bouquet balls with the least amount of optical vignetting, which is a huge plus. On the flip side, the TTArtisan has the smallest bouquet balls and the most noticeable optical vignetting. Now let's look at the background blur at different distances, both indoors and outdoors. All of these lenses produce smooth background blur, so you can't really go wrong with any of them. But personally, my favorite bouquet goes in this order. First Viltrox, then Nikon, and then TTArtisan and Sony. How about you? Which one do you like best? Conclusion. Just a quick reminder, this is a comparison, as I said before, and each of these lenses has its own strengths. The best choice really depends on what matters most to you. Let's start with the best overall lens. The Nikon Z is the sharpest with the best build quality and superior optical performance. It offers excellent distortion and aberration correction, plus top-notch flare resistance. But of course it comes at a premium price, making it the most expensive option here. The Viltrox is not quite as sharp as the others, but its sharpness is still more than good enough for portraits and general use. Just have a look at the sample images here. Personally, I find it has the most pleasing bouquet. That said, it does have some optical weaknesses compared to the rest. The Sony lens is a solid performer across all tested categories. No major flaws here. But as the oldest lens in the group, it's starting to show its age. It's good overall, but it doesn't really stand out or shine in any specific area. The TTArtisan is the smallest lens of the group, with the lowest price, but don't let the small size or price fool you. It is offering an impressive sharpness across most of the frame, and rivaling the Nikon in those areas and some other test categories. Though it falls short in the corners, it's also the only lens with an aperture ring, which is great for those who love retro-style handling and manual control. At 10mm shorter than the others, its compact size is a real plus. And for the price, you could pick up this lens and another one, making it an incredible value. To sum it up, if top-notch optical performance and build quality are your priorities, and price is no issue, then Nikon is your best bet. If you want the lightest, most compact lens with great performance and value, the TTArtisan is hard to beat. If smooth bokeh is what matters most to you, the Viltrox is your best option. And if you are a Sony user and prefer a brand lens, the Sony still holds up as a reliable choice. As mentioned earlier, this review is also available in written format on our blog, where you'll find detailed test charts on sharpness and other characteristics. I've also listed a few alternatives at the end of the article for those interested. Most of the sample images in high resolution can be viewed on a separate site. Links to the blog post and the sample images are included in the description below. If you are interested in buying any of these lenses, you can support our efforts by using the links in the description. It won't cost you a penny and it won't affect the price, but it helps us a little. You can also donate to support the channel. Huge thanks for watching. Any comments are most welcome. If you liked this video, give it the thumbs up. And for more content like this, please subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Until the next video, have a fantastic time, everyone.